All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are jumping into a huge idea, something that's both powerful and, well, pretty provocative. It's called auto-ownership, and it's all about the idea that you, and only you, are the ultimate boss of your own life. So let's get right into it. So, let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you consider yourself the absolute 100% sovereign of your own body, your mind? What about the work you do, the things you create? I mean, think about it. It sounds simple, right? But the implications, they are absolutely massive. And this question is the very heart of everything we're going to unpack today. And that question right there, that is the essence of auto-ownership. It's this core principle that you hold the ultimate authority over yourself. We're talking your body, your thoughts, and everything that comes from your effort. The idea is that this stuff belongs to you, and you alone. No one, and I mean no one, has a higher claim to it. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the thinkers who kicked this whole thing off, then dive into the critique of the state that flows from it. After that, we'll look at how people are actually trying to practice this stuff today, and finally, we'll tackle the big challenges and the pushback. All right, first up, the philosophical founders. You know, every big idea has its origin story, its pioneers. And for auto-ownership, our story really kicks off centuries ago with a couple of key thinkers who basically planted the seeds for everything that came later. Yeah, this idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's got a long history. You can trace it back to the 17th century, where a guy named John Locke first planted the seed of what he called natural property. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Murray Rothbard comes along and he cranks it up to 11, turning it into absolute self-ownership. And today, we're seeing its DNA in everything from anarcho-capitalism to some really cutting-edge tech. So let's start at the beginning with John Locke. He's this major Enlightenment philosopher, and he drops a truly revolutionary idea on the world. He says, every man has a property in his own person. Now, today, that might sound kind of obvious, but back then, it was a bombshell. The idea that your body, your very self, is fundamentally yours, that was a real game changer. So Locke's basic recipe was pretty straightforward. You own your body, so you own your labor, and when you mix your labor with something unowned, boom, it becomes your property. Simple. But, and this is a really important but, Locke wasn't some kind of absolutist. He put in a couple of key limits. He said you have to leave enough and as good for everyone else, and you can't be wasteful. So there's a built-in sense of social responsibility. Okay, so now let's jump forward a few hundred years. An economist named Murray Rothbard comes along, takes Locke's foundational idea, and just runs with it, like way past where Locke ever intended. Rothbard's thinking was, if you truly own yourself 100%, then how can any state have a monopoly on deciding what is and isn't your property? He saw it as a total contradiction, fundamentally illegitimate. And this is where you really see the idea evolve. Or maybe mutate. For Locke, you could have natural property and have a state and have some social limits. The two could coexist. But for Rothbard, absolutely not. True self-ownership, in his view, demanded a total rejection of state authority. No ifs, ands, or buts. No compromise. So Rothbard's take really sets the stage for the central conflict here, right? It's this big showdown, the sovereign individual versus the state's claim over what it calls public property. And from this auto-ownership point of view, the difference couldn't be more stark. On one side, you have state-created titles, which the source material claims are based on coercion. Public lands, in this view, are just lands that were historically taken or expropriated. But on the other side, you have what they call legitimate private property, something that can only come about through voluntary action, labor, and fair exchange. And the argument against state bureaucracy just keeps building from there. Proponents say it creates this whole mess of problems. You've got legal uncertainty with crazy long processes and fees. You get resources and land concentrated in the hands of the politically connected. And of course, it's what justifies all kinds of intrusions they see as illegitimate, like compulsory taxes and regulations. All of this is seen as a direct attack on the very idea of self-sovereignty. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all interesting philosophy, but how does it actually work? If you reject the state's authority, what do you do? And that's a great question. It brings us to how people are trying to put these ideas into practice right now, moving from the world of books to the real world.
For those who follow this path, there's a kind of a step-by-step guide to practicing self-sovereignty. It all starts inside, with a mental shift, really recognizing and internalizing the principle. From there, it moves outward. You start decentralizing your contracts and agreements. You build or join voluntary communities. And the final piece of the puzzle is figuring out how to protect yourself without dialing 911.
And this is where modern technology comes in, big time. Things like the blockchain, Ethereum, Tezos, are seen as huge game changers. They offer a way to create immutable, verifiable digital contracts. And then you've got tokenization, which is this wild idea of turning physical things, like a piece of real estate or art, into digital tokens that you can trade directly, peer-to-peer. The whole point is to cut out the middleman, the central authority that has to approve everything.
But hey, it's not all just happening on a computer screen. This is about real-world, physical communities too. We're seeing people form everything from free zones and autonomous condos to eco-villages and co-ops. They're creating their own peer-to-peer trust networks and even private arbitration associations to handle disagreements. The common thread? They're all trying to operate on purely voluntary principles, outside the official state systems.
Okay, let's hit the brakes for a second, because a vision of a society with no state, based purely on self-ownership, well, it raises some pretty big questions, right? There's a lot of skepticism. So now we're going to fairly lay out some of the toughest objections and then, using our source material, explore the responses that proponents of this philosophy offer up.
And here it is, the big one. You've probably been thinking it this whole time, but without the state, wouldn't it just be total chaos? A complete free-for-all, where the strongest just take whatever they want? Might makes right. It's the question that always comes up.
Well, the response from proponents is interesting, because they don't just give you a theory. They point to history. They'll bring up examples like private courts and arbitration systems that actually existed and worked pretty well in places like the American West in the 19th century. Their point is that this isn't some sci-fi fantasy. Voluntary governance has happened before, and it can happen again. Okay, but what about this? Let's say you do have private courts and private protection agencies. What's to stop one of them from getting super powerful, crushing all the competition, and basically becoming a new private government? A monopoly on force that could make inequality even worse. This is where the argument really flips the script. Proponents will tell you that the real problem of monopoly and favoritism comes from the state itself. They believe that a state, by its very nature, is a monopoly that favors insiders. Their argument is that a truly free and competitive market in protection and legal services would do the exact opposite. Competition, they say, would actually drive down costs and reduce barriers, making justice more accessible to everyone.
And when you boil it all down, all these arguments and examples, you get to the real philosophical heart of this idea. It's about a profound internal shift in how you see the world. It's about moving away from looking for an external authority and toward the recognition that you are your own God, the supreme authority over your own life.
So if there's one key thing to take away from all this, it's this. For the people who believe in this, sovereignty isn't just some passive belief you hold. It's an active practice. It's about constantly questioning the state's authority over property, intentionally moving away from relying on its systems, and actively choosing to use decentralized, voluntary alternatives instead.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We live in this incredible age of digital decentralization, with tools that our ancestors could have never dreamed of. So, in this new world, what does sovereignty, what does being the ultimate authority over your own life truly mean to you? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.